Well, thank you guys for coming today. My name is Shawn Lane. My company is Financial Renovation Solutions. We go by FRS Credit. We've been doing this credit repair business for about 6 years now, but not new to it. When I was a young kid in the late 80s, I screwed my credit up and made a lot of mistakes, and through that process figured out how to fix it, studied some laws, and I actually wrote a self-published book in 1992 called The Consumer's Guide to Credit Restoration. It was self-published, it was before the internet, and so I tried marketing it the old-fashioned way through classified ads and mail order, and never really did anything with it. I helped friends and family along the way kind of get their credit cleaned up until 2013 when we decided to start a business. We've always been entrepreneurial, and we've been in the telecom business forever, and our margins just slowly eroded over the course of 20 years out of that business, and decided, we should start credit repair. There's a lot of people out there that need help. And it's a pretty big deal. It's like 78% of people have at least one derogatory thing on their credit report that's affecting them. And, and those are probably factual things. But then on top of that, 20% of people actually have errors. Things that don't belong to them or that are reported incorrectly. So in the credit repair world, it's not whether it happened. What matters is it reporting accurately, and can it be verified? So that's pretty much the game that we, the arena that we live in. Credit, everybody knows these definitions, I believe, but obviously credit is the confidence and ability, or the confidence in a borrower's ability and intention to pay by trusting them with goods or services. And then of course a credit score is a number that's pretty important in every area of our life these days. And really the way FICO is designed, the FICO scoring model, is it predicts the likelihood of a consumer becoming 90 days late on a single obligation within the next 2 years. So that's what that score is all about. FICO is pretty much the company that's used in lending. There are other scoring models, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. I don't want to touch on it too much, but pretty much FICO owns the market. Credit scores influence more than just the ability to be able to buy a house or get a credit card or whatever. I see on credit reports every day, I see 18 to 22, 24% on an auto loan. And it's just crazy. People are still able to buy a car with bad credit, but boy, they're going to pay for it, through the interest. I think it's a $36,000 auto loan, the difference between a good rate of about 3% and a high interest rate of 18. I think over 5 years, it's something like 12 grand in interest. So it's just crazy. And people, they still do this. And so what happens is people pay more for everything when their credit scores are low, and it affects their ability to save and keeps them in that paycheck to paycheck mode. Your auto insurance, the primary underwriting criteria is not your driving record, it's your credit score. You can pay as much as twice if you have poor credit. You pay as much as twice on your auto insurance. So if you're married and you have low credit scores, it's always best to put the spouse, if they've got higher credit scores, put them as the primary on the insurance, because it will definitely save money if their credit scores are better. So that's a tip. The other thing is homeowners policy. I think it's poor credit versus good credit. It's 32% more based on a study in 2015 in the insurance industry. So, it's a big deal. And then, of course, on top of that, it's putting up security deposits on, utilities or cell phones or whatever. People have to put up deposits when they have, low credit scores. Money Magazine had an article last year that talked about the cost of poor credit. And they determined that, on average, poor credit costs people $350 a month or $4,200 a year. And that's just on average. And that's in paying more for everything and other missed opportunities. Employers obviously are looking at credit now. They're not looking at credit scores, but they're looking at credit reports. They want to see what kind of issues, are you paying your bills, and all of that. And so it's a big deal, and it keeps people from opportunities that are out there. So this is where it kind of gets interactive. If you guys, do you know your credit score? Mm-hmm. And are you willing to share it? Mm-hmm. Is the first question. So what's your credit score?
685.
Okay, what about you?
Just under 800.
Okay, that's very nice. And let me tell you, we're going to talk about some strategies, because there's great strategies on getting set up properly, with when you're married and stuff. And you take care of that while you're young, because I learned the hard way, and I really am passionate about teaching this stuff, because a lot of times it's not about repair, it's just about using it correctly so you can maximize your scores, and we talk to people about that all day long. Okay, so what credit score are we talking about? Or, do you know what score that is, or how many scores you have? There's multiple versions of FICO. So it's super confusing, because when you go buy a car, they'll say, hey, this is your credit score, but you're like, well, wait a minute, I just closed on a house and the lender said it was this, but when I check Credit Karma, it's something else. And so the reality is that credit scoring models are all over the board. Credit scores are kind of like the OS on your cell phone. There's always a new one, an upgrade, but if you don't have the proper equipment and systems, if you have an old iPhone, you maybe don't want to do the new upgrade, right? Because it might slow things down. So that's the same thing in the credit scoring world, is that there are versions of FICO that lenders have their system set up for, and it's a big, massive change for them to begin using a new version, so they don't. And so what happens is, in the mortgage world, they're using the earliest versions of FICO, and it's version 2 for Experian, version 5 for Equifax, and version 4 for TransUnion. Yet, when you go and you pull your credit score from Experian.com, you're going to get a FICO version 8, which is kind of the most widely used version for credit monitoring sites. But on top of that, there's all these different models. So you've got an auto-enhanced version. You have a bank card enhanced version. So pretty much, depending on what you're doing, your score is going to be different. Then on top of that, you've got 3 bureaus. So this is a client of mine. This is through MyFICO. If you want to know what all of your FICO scores are, you can pay for it through MyFICO. They finally got smart and said, consumers want to know this information, so you can buy it, and you can buy every version. Okay? It's like, to get their full package, it's like $60 a month. But it is fascinating, because this person, their FICO 2 Experian, so this is an Experian example, FICO 2 is their mortgage score. They were a 704. But their FICO Auto 8 was a 652. So you're looking at 50 points difference. And so those other versions, maybe apply more emphasis towards your auto transaction history. The bank card versions maybe apply more towards that. But the reality is every time you pull your credit, it's going to be different depending on where you pull it from. Now, and this is just lending, because then you go into other scoring models. Anybody have Credit Karma here that use it as a guide?
That's
Credit Karma?
Yeah, it's a free one.
I think that's the one that they had me pull.
Yeah.
First put into that thing.
So Credit Karma uses a Vantage score. So Vantage score is the scoring model that's developed by the 3 credit bureaus. And it's kind of a collaboration between them, and they really want to be considered for lending. And there's been some press over the last couple years about the fact that the mortgage industry is using the earliest versions of FICO, and they need to upgrade that. And when they do, they need to consider alternative methods. And so who knows how all that's going to shake out. But I can tell you that the Vantage score is really not used in lending. It's used by lots of credit monitoring companies, and then lenders will use it for like a pre-approval or a soft credit pull. So when you get those bank card offers in the mail, a lot of times they've looked at your Vantage score because it's cheaper than FICO. So they use it for pre-qualification purposes, but they don't use it for lending decisions. But Vantage definitely wants to be in the running for a credit score. And so they're probably the top non-FICO version that you'll see out there. But Vantage is in a lot of the credit monitoring sites like Credit Karma and others. So, you know, pretty much all over the board when it comes to that. But one thing they all have in common is the 5 major factors on how a credit score is calculated. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time on today, is how your credit score is calculated across all versions. And with this knowledge, you can, you know, use that to maximize your credit scores and make sure you can keep them as strong as possible. So the first area, the biggest bucket is your payment history, and that's 35% of your credit score. So, you know, when you pay something 30 days late or more, it hits this bucket. Okay, if you have a collection or a charge-off or some other derogatory on your credit report, it's going to hit this bucket. And so, probably the biggest thing you can control is the payment history. You know, one of you was mentioning the student loans, and I see that a lot. They're in deferment, and so, you know, you kind of forget that they're going to be coming out of deferment or forbearance, and next thing you know, you start getting hit with, you know, 60 and 90-day lates on your student loans. And I've seen a single 30-day late drop a credit score 100 points. And so it's a really big deal. So a couple things that's real important to know about this is, number one, it's a 30-day late. So you can be late. They can't report you late until you're 30 days late, according to the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So if you forget and you pay, you know, you get the notice from Capital One and they say that you're late, don't sweat that too much, as long as you're nowhere near the 30-day mark. Don't even get close to that, you know, because I've seen people, they've paid it on time, or I should say before the 30 days, but they didn't post the payment to your account. So, you know, stay away from that. If you're late, even if you pay a late fee, your score should be okay unless you hit the 30-day late mark. But the other thing that's going to hit this is any other derogatory thing. So, you know, a charge-off on a credit card, a collection account, you know, a bankruptcy, you know, just other type of things that hit the credit report in a derogatory way. It's going to hit this bucket, okay? And this is a big bucket. We'll talk about this a little bit more in detail, but the highest FICO score is an 850, and the lowest is a 300. So you do the math, and there's 550 points of manipulation between those two. So 35% of 550 is 192 points. So that's the potential impact to your credit score is 192. Now it's not going to affect everybody, 192 points. That's the maximum that bucket can hit you. But it's an easy, you know, guy with great credit in the 700s, late payment is going to be in the 600s. You're going to drop 100 points. And you probably saw an example of that on those student loans. So that's the first thing, and that's something we can certainly control, is it's keeping our eye on the ball in most cases. Okay, and the other thing that's important to know, the impact of this is the same if it's a minimum payment on a credit card of $25 or if it's your mortgage. It's not about the amount of the debt, it's about the fact that it was late. So, you know, that's what that is. The next big bucket is your revolving debt. Okay, so I'm sure you guys are familiar with revolving debt and what that is, right? Versus installment debt. So your revolving are like your credit cards, your lines of credit. Your installments are like your student loans, your car loans, your personal loans. A mortgage is kind of an installment loan, but it's a mortgage. I mean, it's different than an installment loan, but it's kind of factored in that category. So 30% of our credit score, or if you do that math, 165 points is this bucket. So people without credit cards are potentially losing 165 points. You know, so it's a big deal. You want to have 3 credit cards on your credit report, but you want to have low utilization of the credit limit. Yep.
So these people who pay their credit card off every month before their statement hits and shows that they have 20% utilization are hurting themselves, right?
Okay, so
Like down to a zero balance?
Yeah, they pay down to zero and then they get their statement which says they don't owe anything. I always thought it was like, if you have 80% right before your statement hits, knock it down to like 20, let that hit, and then pay the rest after that.
So a couple things with that. That's a great point. Number one is you want your utilization to be as low as possible, but ideally not zero. Okay, because you're going to score.
Show you're using it, and there's some chance for them to make money at some point.
That's right. So a dollar balance on a credit card is better than a zero balance. Okay. Now, when you get into the actual what's the best percentage of utilization, it's 1%. But there's not a lot of difference between 1% and 9% utilization. But definitely, if you're within that 10 percentage points, you're going to maximize your credit scores.
Okay.
It's important to know that they report once a month, and that's your statement balance. So people who pay their credit card in full every month, if they don't have enough credit limits between all of their cards to keep their utilization low, even though they're doing the right thing, the responsible thing, and they're paying that credit card in full every month, they're paying after it reported your balance, right? Because, so, a couple of tips with that. Yeah, so a couple of tips with that, of course, like you said, is paying before the statement comes out, or paying a couple of times a month, as opposed to just paying, once a month. But the fix for this is lots of credit cards, okay? Now, you don't go out and apply for a lot, but you never close one. Because when you close a credit card, you lose the credit limit from the calculation of your utilization percentage. And so, the person with two $1,000 credit cards, and he's using, $500 a month, so he's about 25% utilized. As soon as he decides, hey, I'm closing the other one because it has an annual fee and I don't want to pay it, now he just cut his credit limits in half and he drove up his utilization.
50, yeah.
So, big deal. This is probably the area we have the most control over the manipulation of our credit score is right here.
So when you say $1 balance, that's good on all the cards, but as far as the whole thing, it pulls all of them together. Because like right now I have 4 cards. 3 of them are at 0, which the total of those credit lines is like $30,000. But then my main card, that's a $29,000 line. I owe about 10 on it, maybe. Or yeah, about 9 to 10. So I guess total between all of them, it's like I have 10,000 out on 59,000. So does it matter that those other ones are at 0? Should I still do like a lunch charge on it or something, so at least that way it shows a balance on those other 3 cards?
So it looks at those. It puts more weight on the total utilization. Okay, so you do get hurt because you're utilizing one at a higher percentage, but not as bad as if it was in total that way, okay? You will pick up a little bit of score points for using those credit cards on a monthly basis.
Okay.
And what I would recommend you do at a minimum is if you just don't want to carry them, don't want to use them once every 6 months so the bank doesn't close them for inactivity. If you really want to maximize your credit scores, stick something on each of them, a Netflix, a credit monitoring account, something that you can auto bill and auto pay and not have to carry the card and think about it, okay? And we'll talk about why in a little bit, but the main thing that happens is when you close a credit card, you lose the credit limit, and so you want to just make sure that you keep those cards open. Now, if it is a card that you have an annual fee and you don't like the annual fee, or you don't get sufficient reward points for paying that annual fee, then you just need to make the decision, but not blindly. You need to make the decision, if I close this account, how does that affect my overall utilization? Just want to be real careful with that. It might be worth
Try and apply for another card that doesn't have the annual fee, but it's around the same credit line or something like that. So at least if you get rid of this one, you're kind of washing it out with the other one.
Yeah, possibly. The other thing you can do is if you don't want to pay the annual fee, a lot of times these banks will waive it for a year when you threaten to close the account. So they'll waive it for maybe a year and let you say, hey, I haven't been using it. I don't really know if I want the card. the annual fee is causing me to maybe rethink this, and a lot of times they might go ahead and waive that, but they won't continue to waive it.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
At least by a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like worth the extra $100 a year to have that much.
It is.
available utilization.
Yeah.
Who cares about a $100 fee even if you don't use it?
Yeah.
And the reason why people talk about store cards being bad, you know, one, applying for, you know, the store card, like, you know, you're at J. Crew or wherever, and they're like, hey, if you sign up for the card, you get an extra percentage or whatever. You know, you want to just minimize those credit applications as much as possible. But once you already have those cards open, I would keep them open, but I wouldn't use those unless you needed something. I mean, the beauty of the major credit cards is you can stick other things on there. You know, the problem with the store cards is you have to use them at the store. And so I don't particularly like store cards, but you know, to shop at a place, you almost have to use the store card to get all the discounts these days, whether it's Kohl's or Old Navy or
You go there all the time, it's worth it.
yeah, so it's worth it, you know. Okay, so the next big area is the age of your credit file. And there's really two major factors in that. It's the oldest account, and it is also the average age. So it's the you know, doing the math between all of your accounts. So I'll give you an example. We have some high-profile clients, and one of them, we fixed his credit about 5 years ago, and he just has us watch it every month. And he does not like using his credit. And I've been after him you got to get another credit card. So he finally got an American Express card so he could quit using his one revolving card. I'm after him to get 3 revolving. But he pretty much hits an 850 every month now on Experian, but not on the other 2 bureaus. And the reason is because he doesn't use credit. And so he's got this old Mercedes-Benz auto loan that's still on Experian, but it's not reporting to the other 2 bureaus. So his age of his credit file is a lot shorter on the other 2 bureaus because it's a positive account and it fell off of his credit report. This month, in the month of February, that Mercedes-Benz account that he opened in 2005, that he closed in January of 2000, and it was 10 years ago, so 2009, that account fell off of his credit report because positive accounts generally stay on your report for 10 years. It dropped his average age of his credit file and the total age of his credit file, and now he's an 838. So it's very hard to be an 850, but the average age and the age of your credit file is a big deal. And the other reason why you never want to close a credit card is it's going to affect you down the road, okay? You know, it hurts your credit limits right now, but it's going to hurt the age of your credit file down the road when that positive account drops off after there's been no activity for 10 years. So it's just a good idea to keep all of them open if you want to maximize your scores, okay? Opening too many accounts in a short period of time is going to drop the average age of your credit file, and so that's important to not, you know, to pay attention to that. The other thing that hits this, which a lot of people don't realize, is using your existing accounts hits this because they're looking at really, you know, 4 major things. It's when was the last, you know, what's your oldest account? When did you open your most recent account? What's the average age of your accounts? And then when did you last use those accounts? And so that's where a credit card, if you're not using it, you're going to lose a little bit of potential scores, you know, points by not having payment history. Even if you're keeping the utilization low or you're keeping it at 0, you're going to lose a little bit because you don't have payment history on that card. But we're talking small amount of points. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, the next bucket is your mix of credit. So mix is important. You want to have a healthy mix of credit because it shows the scoring model that you are able to be responsible with different types of credit accounts. So a lot of weight gets put on the revolving because that's an account, a credit card that you can use up to the credit limit, but you choose not to, so you're responsible and all that. So, to maximize your credit scores, you really need to have a minimum of 3 credit cards. You can have more. I hear people say, well, I've got too many credit cards and that's hurting my score. You received the damage getting to too many credit cards along the way, right? Applying for too many accounts and all that. But once you have them, there is no score benefit to closing them. None at all. It's just going to hurt your score. So once you have 10 or 20 cards, I would never close any of them unless you apply that criteria to them about, is it worth it for me to have it? Am I paying an annual fee? Do I care about it? But the proper mix is 1 installment loan minimum, and then 3 credit cards, and then a mortgage on top of that. A person with a mortgage is going to score higher than a person without a mortgage.
Would an installment account be like a car loan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I've got the perfect mix now.
Oh, you do, huh?
Yeah, I close on my house in like 2 weeks, so I'll have a car, a house, and 3 credit cards.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah. So that's a great mix. You can have more. You'll find that having additional installment debt is not going to hurt your credit score like revolving debt. So you can have 4 or 5 installment loans. You can have a lot of student loans. When people come to us and say, hey, I've got this amount of money, what should I do with it to improve my credit score? Always pay credit cards down, number 1, okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, number 2, then it's looking at the installment loans and the interest and, what are you paying on your interest rate for your auto loan and all that. The last thing we talk about are those debts if your goal is to improve your credit score, those defaulted debts. And we'll talk about those in a few minutes on, why you want to be careful when you go pay something that's in collections or has been charged off, because although it may be the right thing to do to pay it, it will generally hurt your credit score if you pay it. So we'll talk about that. So that's the proper mix. And then, of course, the last thing is the new credit. Anytime you open a new account, it's going to hurt your take on debt. It's going to hurt your score a little bit. Of course, the inquiry. So when you applied for the credit, it's going to hurt you a little bit. And so, as far as inquiries go, I say all the time, just, treat them like gold. Be very, very careful with inquiries. You don't want to go out and apply for things you don't need. How many mortgage inquiries did you end up having? Just one. So that's good. A lot of people like to rate shop, when they're looking at a mortgage company. Yeah, and so, there's things built into the scoring model to account for that. So, all mortgage applications. Within 30 days or something? Yeah, I believe it's actually within 45 days, they count as one, okay? And then within, the mortgage actual inquiry doesn't hurt your score for 30 days. So you'll see a dip 30 days after your credit pull, or maybe it already happened, if you had your credit pulled a while ago.
Notification that it was pulled.
Yeah, so 30 days, that won't affect your score for 30 days. Okay. But what'll happen is your score, you'll take a little bit of a hit once that mortgage, after the 30-day mark, that's when it affects you a little bit.
I get a little bit of a boost for having that.
You will, yeah. So if you see a dip, it'll be a month, most likely, and then you'll pick that, up from there.
I just started an LLC for all my business stuff, and I plan on getting a credit card for that. How does that work into my personal mix, if at all?
So you always want to develop credit on your business EIN. Yeah. And there's a strategy to that we help people with. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to leverage yourself personally for your business if you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but there's lots of things you can do to build credit in the business name that's separate and apart from your social. Yeah. And so we have a business credit building program where we help. I actually have a client coming in today to start that process. Okay. And so I can give you more information about that if you want. Yeah, I'll call you. But it's a great deal because you can end up. I see a lot of entrepreneurial people or business owners who their business has hurt their personal credit, because they've leveraged themselves. Maybe they don't have derogatory stuff, but maybe they've got a lot of credit card type debt on their credit report and it's from the business. Yeah. So if you can avoid that, by setting things up properly. And there's a science to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
Basically trying to separate everything going forward.
yeah, and you gotta know what the lender's looking for, and you gotta leave your social off of the application. You know, because if you offer it and they have the spot there, you know, when you're applying in the business name, if you offer it, they're going to take it and put you on, right? But you want the business to do it on the strength of its own credit.
Okay.
So yeah. So anyway, so 10%. So that's the you know, that's the last major piece. So looking at this, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but how each of these buckets end up affecting, you know, what's the total amount of points that each bucket can affect you. It doesn't mean it's going to, but that's kind of the area where you can manipulate your credit scores and make them as high as possible. One of the things I always look at with our clients is one of the first things we ask them is, do you know somebody that will be willing to put you on one of their credit cards as an authorized user? Okay? An old account with a high credit limit and a positive payment history, because if you know that account, you can add an authorized user and not even issue a card, and then that account starts reporting to your credit report. So it's a great.
Average hurt theirs at all?
No, it doesn't bleed over. So it's a great strategy. Parents for kids, that's how I help my kids build their credit.
Can I do that with my uncle?
Yeah, absolutely you can. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, you got to be careful. There are companies out there that sell this, okay, as a service, and we consider that bank fraud, right?
Totally.
Because, you know, they basically, if somebody buys a trade line to be placed on their credit report for 90 days so that it can manipulate the score, temporarily so they can get approved, that's bank fraud. There is nothing wrong with, you know, family and friends doing it.
Yeah.
You know, but when you pay for a service and you don't know the person, because there's brokers that broker this stuff, we stay far away from that because it's illegal. Okay?
Definitely something you'd want to know. So like that situation, once you authorize them though, and if your uncle knows you're authorized, would he be able to call them and say, hey, send me a card?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
So the primary still has to be the one to say, yeah, go ahead and send them one.
That's right. And the secondary or the authorized user is not responsible for that debt. So let's say things went bad and the uncle didn't end up paying his card. You remove yourself as an authorized user, and it comes off.
What if, I mean, so you hit him on one card,
Mm-hmm.
what if he's got multiple? Can you jump on all of those?
Absolutely you can, yeah.
Do yourself more?
Yep, definitely.
That's amazing.
Then when those report, what you want to do, you want to be strategic, because you don't want to have those forever. Okay, so you want to be strategic, and now you want to start strategically getting your own high limit credit cards because you've got these others reporting to your credit report.
So if I got 3 high ones with him and then I start knocking those off, then it throws my whole freaking, I guess, ratio off at that point.
A little bit, but you want to make sure you end up getting some high ones through your own efforts, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, later on, you don't want something to hurt you from his stuff. Even though you can remove yourself, you don't have control over it, right? And so,
I
you know.
trust him more than I trust myself.
Do you? Okay. So authorized user, I mean, it affects a large portion of your credit score. I mean, because if you can be added as to a high limit card that has a positive payment history, you know, a card that's been open for 10 or 20 years, I mean, that's a great thing. It has a low percentage of utilization and a high limit, so that helps fix your revolving utilization if yours is high. You pick up the length of the credit history, and you do all of that without the inquiry, because there's no hard inquiry for doing that.
That's what I was going to ask. So it doesn't necessarily hit you as a new account opening because you are getting added to this older card.
That's right. Yep. So it's a great strategy. I would be added to as many as possible. So the other thing that I say, as far as spouses go, try not to apply for anything other than the mortgage jointly. If you can, buy your own cars. Don't do joint accounts. Get your own credit cards. Add the other as an authorized user. My wife and I have one joint credit card. It's a Discover card that's been open since we've been married for 31 years. Other than that, the rest of our accounts are all individual, and we add ourselves as a user. And then if we decide to take advantage of, cash advance, 0 interest for 9-month type of a deal, then we may, if we have something we want to do, we may do that and elect to aggressively pay it down and not open an installment loan. And we'll remove the other one from that account as an authorized user so that that high balance isn't hurting us. But we're very strategic with our credit. The other benefit of that is, let's say something goes wrong. Let's say that, economy changes, and you can't make your bills. You can decide whose credit you're going to protect. Okay? If you're joint on everything, you're going to damage both of your credits. That's exactly right. So that's a great, great deal. So let's talk about some mistakes, some things to avoid. Obviously, that's the number one deal killer right there. It's paying something 30 days late. Now, student loans, the beauty of student loans is they don't report you late until you're 90 days late. So you really have some extra time there. If they're in deferment or they're in forbearance and you forget, I know that paperwork takes some time. They give you a little bit of extra. So when you see a student loan late, it's a 90. It hits the credit report. Sometimes, depending on the servicer, it's a 60, but most of the time it's a 90. So you're pretty late at that point.
What is forbearance again? Is that just like an account that
So forbearance is, so deferment is you don't have to make your student loan repayments while you're in school or until 6 months, I believe, from or after you quit being a full-time student.
Yeah. Okay.
Forbearance is normally like a income-based thing. You say, hey, listen, I'm not making the money yet. I want to put these in forbearance. You have a lot of flexibility with federal loans more than private loans. So that's the other thing to be careful of with your student loans is the government affords us a lot of benefits for them having the loans. You can do deferment. You can do a lot of forbearance. But once they, if you refinance those into a private servicer, there's a lot of, a lot of lost benefits. But I'll tell you, the federal student loans will never go away. Okay, the private student loans can be bankrupted, or you can default on those and settle those out. Through debt settlement or something like that, where the federal ones you can't. So there's pros and cons on both sides.
Or maybe Bernie will just pay it for you.
Maybe.
Yeah,
It's the next big crisis we have, right? Is the student loan crisis.
If I'd known I could go to college for free, I would have done it.
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah. I'm gonna take it. Like everyone's gonna get their shit paid for, and I was the guy who was like, I'm not gonna go into debt for something I'm not even sure is gonna pay off or that I'm gonna need completely. Like.
And
People
then
will get these pointless liberal arts degrees that cost them $200K, and then they're just gonna get them wiped away. It's like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. He can bleep that out. It's a big deal. I mean, the student sometimes I see $200K in student loans, and they're still not paying them because they are in deferment and they're still going to school. Why are they going to school? So they can be in deferment. You're right. But it's ridiculous. And I'm like, you're never going to get out from under that. You're never going to be able to buy a house, And you better start your own business or take maximum deductions because they'll start taking your income tax return. But if you're a business owner and you pay taxes, then they really don't have much of a way to get those from you.
Separate.
Yeah. Okay, so never pay late. Never close a credit card. We talked about why. Keep the balances low. This is a big deal, co-signing. I see this a lot. Sometimes it's the only thing. I have clients say, hey, listen, I co-signed for my brother and he paid late or he didn't pay and the car was repossessed. Okay? Don't put your hard-earned credit score in the hands of somebody else. When you do, you're basically telling the bank that you're smarter than the bank, right? You're like, well, Johnny's going to pay me. You're like, Johnny didn't pay any of his bills. Look at his credit, Well, he's going to pay me, or he's going to pay because it's me. And the thing is that these credit scoring models, They're very sophisticated, and they kind of determine, past actions kind of predict the future of how somebody's going to act. And so, here's my rule of thumb with co-signing. If you're going to co-sign for somebody, a lot of times we do it for our kids. I mean, I co-signed for all of my kids, and part of that was strategic because when they turned 21 and we bought them their second car, we did a joint auto loan for a short period of time, a 3-year note, and put them on it so that they could develop auto credit so that they could get their own loan later. But I always knew I was making the payment while they were in school, and I'm watching it. So if you're going to co-sign for somebody, make sure, one, you have the ability to step in and take over that payment if you need to. But two, and almost just as important as that, is you want to make sure that you're keeping up with that account and making sure they're paying. Because if they're just paying it late, but they're making the payment, it's just damaging your credit score, and it's going to damage it until they get out of that car, sell it, default out of it, whatever. And so,
And in your situation with the kids, it defeats the whole purpose, trying to get them a good credit score to relates.
yeah.
Writing it anyways.
Yeah, and so, we knew, okay, it's going to be a 3-year note, and, we want to build them credit. I know I'm already paying for it, but, I would never. Now, there's one of my friends who's in this business, and he does a lot of teaching. He says, if you're going to co-sign for somebody, what you should do is carry the note and charge them the interest, okay? So basically what he says is take a down from them and have them pay you 18% interest and you make the payments, okay? That's a great idea. Problem with that is you do kind of risk yourself in that, if he was in a bad accident, you're on the title of the car too, so they can sue you, So I don't know. I say stay away from it. It's not worth it.
I'm not even close to being able to co-sign for someone.
Yeah.
Don't even think that.
Yeah. Avoid joint accounts. We kind of talked about that and the strategy behind that. Don't apply for credit unless it's absolutely necessary. Okay, this is a big deal, especially with you young guys. You young guys don't like paper bills and stuff. You guys do everything on,
Everything's paperless.
Yeah. So here's the deal. I've seen more people who had late payments because they forgot about something, okay? Maybe it's the annual fee on the credit card they never use, and for whatever reason, they didn't see the email, so they're not used to paying that. And so what happens is they end up with a 30-day late on their credit report because they missed something. My point with this is use the paper bill as a backup. I mean, it's just another reminder that you got a bill due. I make them send paper. I still use auto pay and all of the benefits for that, but I make sure that I have them send me a paper bill just so that we don't miss it. Have credit monitoring. I have one in there, one of the flyers for Identity IQ. It's the one that we like. It's a Vantage credit score, so it's not a FICO score, but a couple benefits of having credit monitoring. One, if anything happens on your credit report, you're going to know about it. So if you pay late, you're going to get an alert. If a collection account from some rental-related debt shows up, maybe that UVerse says they didn't receive the cable box when you moved, and now you have a third-party debt collection company hitting your credit report, you're going to know about it if you have credit monitoring. If you don't have credit monitoring, you're going to find out about it when you apply for credit somewhere. And so you need to have time to deal with these issues and be proactive in case something does happen, you can work on it. But the other beauty of credit monitoring is identity theft related stuff. If your address changes on your credit report, you're going to get a notification if somebody applies for credit, or if you apply for credit, you'll get an email or a text that says that there was a new application in your name. So you're going to be notified of things happening on your credit report. So we utilize Identity IQ for our clients. One of the things we like is it does give a $1 7-day trial. So if somebody wants us to take a look at their credit, it just costs $1. We don't charge them for a free credit review, but we do have to have access to a credit report. But then I recommend people keep it. It's a small expense of $21 a month in order to know what's going on with your credit. A lot of us get alerts through credit cards and banks and other things, but something about having it all in one place as opposed to, when you get an alert from Capital One on credit-wise, they're looking at a TransUnion credit report. So you're not getting all three, and so you want to make sure you're looking at all three. Stay away from short-term installment loans because they end up hurting your average age of your credit file. You guys don't do this, but I see people that do those payday loans, and they don't ever pay them back, and they keep flipping it into a new loan, and
Sure, I know what that is.
it's just a high.
So you're just trying to get some money before Friday.
And it's low income areas. It's a high interest rate. It's usury. It's a racket for sure. But people who get into that because things get tight, they get stuck in that. And not only is the interest outrageous, but they have to keep rolling those into another loan. And so I see 20, 30 of these on the credit report, and it just hurts the credit score because it's just multiple new loans on the credit report. This is what we were talking about, right? If you own a business, build business credit on your tax ID number separate from your social. It can be done. A lot of people don't realize it, but you can build business credit separate that you're not responsible for and that doesn't hit your credit report. So, when you leverage, when you borrow in your business, you want to make sure it doesn't hurt you personally if possible. Okay? Credit score myths. I hear that a lot. Well, I'm closing that card. If you pay down your credit cards, we already talked about that. Don't close it. Keep it open. So it's, your credit score is definitely going to be different on each bureau for a number of reasons, but one of those is not every creditor reports to all three bureaus. Now, your major ones do, but some creditors only report to one or two bureaus. And then when you apply for credit, not every creditor pulls all three. So, they may only pull an Equifax report. And then there's also a timing issue. So although the bank reports on the same day to all three bureaus about your Capital One card, they each have a different amount of time that it takes them to import that. So I always see differences when the credit's pulled around the reporting time because they may not all be updated simultaneously. Paying off a collection account. So let's talk about that real quick. This is a big deal in the credit repair business is people, when they don't pay a bill, okay, if it's a bill that is like, something that doesn't generally report to the credit bureaus, like a cell phone or something, a utility bill, an apartment, yeah, all those things, if you don't pay, eventually they're going to get sold to a debt collector. And that debt collector will report it to your credit report so that it impacts your credit score so that they can get your attention so that you'll pay it. Okay? The other thing is when something gets charged off as bad debt. You all know what a charge-off is? It's like you don't pay your credit card. What happens is you go 30 days, 60 days, all the way up to 180 days. Then eventually the IRS makes those companies charge it off as bad debt, to get it off of their books. Charge off doesn't mean you don't owe. It means that the bank has now written it off as bad debt and they put it in another bucket, okay? Whenever something's charged off or sent to collections, generally speaking, it's not the debt that's hurting your credit score. It's the recency of the transaction, of the reporting. So here's what happens. People get, they live with bad credit. It happens every day. People live, unhealthy lifestyle. They live overweight. People live with bad credit. They're just used to it. Until fixing their credit becomes a priority, they don't do it, okay? What people end up doing is they come into some money and they think, oh, I'm going to take my tax return and I'm going to go ahead and pay these collection accounts off. What happens is it will hurt your credit score because it reports new activity. So whenever you pay a third-party debt collector, you want to make sure that they agree to remove it upon receipt of the payment. So you got to negotiate with them about that. And they're not all willing to do it. So then you ask yourself, then why would I pay? Because if I pay, it drops my score. So it's not the amount of the debt, it's the recency of the reporting, kind of the date of the last activity.
If you have something that's behind, let's let's say you left it for like 3 years, and you come and you're like, oh, I'm gonna pay this, and you pay it. Does that reset the 7-year clock, or does it just keep going and just pings you as a recent?
So no, what happens is it's supposed to be 7 years from the date of default. Now, they will try to re-age that debt, but it's illegal. So we watch for that when we're looking at people's credit.
That's
Okay.
something that people think happens a lot.
The other thing that does happen is in Texas, once a debt is 4 years old from the date of default, they can no longer sue you and win in court because it's past the statute of limitations. There's a 4-year statute of limitations on consumer debt in Texas. So, that's the other thing you want to watch for, because sometimes if they don't have the ability to come after you anymore, yeah, they can still try to collect and report it for 7 years on your credit report. But if they can't sue you, why would you pay? Yeah. Okay? And they'll entice you when it gets near the statute of limitations. Hey, start paying $25 a month on this, because a payment will restart the statute of limitations. So that does happen.
That's dirty.
Yep, that happens all the time. Obviously, you guys know that. You guys have separate credit scores. People that check out of credit end up paying more. We talked about this at the beginning. You got to maintain a credit score, because if you don't have one, it's like having bad credit, and you pay more for stuff, and you put up deposits and all of that. I paid off my car, so my credit score should increase. So anytime you pay off an installment loan, actually you're going to see a little dip in your credit score. It's not a lot, but it's going to hurt you.
It's so weird.
It's like counterintuitive. I know. It makes no sense.
Go buy another car.
Yep. Now, obviously, I don't recommend you go get an installment loan to have one on your credit report, but most people need one at some point anyway, a car or something. Household income is not a part of the credit score calculation, of course. This is a big deal. I hear this every day. It's like, well, no, I paid that off. I've said, yeah, but it's still reported as a derogatory on your credit report. So, it's impacting your credit score.
So you gotta call them and say, write me an email saying that if I pay this, you'll take it off my credit report.
Yeah, and you'll have more success with a debt collector than you will an original creditor. Original creditor is not going to agree to that.
Yeah.
So original creditor is, the actual bank or finance company. The third-party debt collector, they're just interested in collecting. They bought the debt at pennies on the dollar, and they just want to collect some money.
So why wouldn't the bankers still want it? If you've actually paid them, why would they be such sticklers about taking it off?
Because it's still a part of your credit history, and it impacts their other lending decisions. If somebody can pay to play, then you can pay, right? Get all of your stuff off your credit report, and then you can take out a loan and default on it. So I think that's the culture of the banks, is that no, we're not taking it off. It's part of your credit history.
You did this.
That's right. And also, I think it goes against their agreements with the credit bureaus for reporting purposes. We talked about that. Too many accounts won't hurt you, but getting there does, right? All those applications. We have credit builder lines for people who can't get revolving credit right now because of their credit score. And so when we work on somebody's credit, we're also going to check that and say, hey, do you have somebody that you can be added as an authorized user? Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, let's get this secured credit card, or let's get this line of credit. It's guaranteed approval. We need that on your credit report, because it's going to be both derogatory work plus adding positive credit. There's really 3 things we do in credit repair. The fixing the bad stuff is just part of it. The other thing we do is we help them build positive credit, because they're missing score potential by not having revolving credit and all that. But then we teach them how these scores are calculated so that they have the knowledge going forward, to keep them strong. Anytime you apply for credit, it does impact your credit score, but you can look at your own credit report whenever you want through credit monitoring companies, and it's a soft credit pull. So if you use the Identity IQ, it's soft pull. Doesn't hurt you. We know that's not true. We know that that's not true. We talked about that. Credit bureaus, definitely for-profit companies. so Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, they make money when you apply for a loan because the bank has to pay them to pull your credit.
It's like a
Okay?
processing fee that they collect.
Yep. They make money every month when you pay your loan because the bank has to pay the credit bureau to report to the credit bureau. Okay? They make money every time you or us dispute the accuracy of something on your credit report because the bank or the finance company has to pay an automated dispute fee of 30 cents every time you dispute something.
We need to start a fourth credit bureau here. It seems like that's a good.
It's a great, and then the other thing is people buy, consumer data from the bureaus to market to you. I mean, they're making money hand over fist. Yeah, exactly. Start a new one. That's not true. Okay, credit bureaus, obviously, there's a whole range of credit scores. And this is a big deal. I think people get stuck in the low credit arena and they feel like there's no hope. And, we believe people deserve a second chance. Sometimes in life it's the loss of a job, might be the downturn of the economy or a business or a marriage or something that hurt, maybe it's a health issue, hurt the credit score, hurt the finances, which in turn hurt the credit score. And we believe those people deserve a second chance. And 7 years is a long time to wait. So what do we do? And we'll wrap it up here. So we are going to, when a client comes to us and they enroll in our services, what we're going to do is work to remove derogatory stuff from the credit report. So how do we do that? We legally do it because there's some key consumer protection laws out there that say whatever's on your credit report has to be accurate, timely, and verifiable. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the positive stuff alone and we're going to work and investigate the derogatory stuff. If it can't be verified, it has to be removed. We have dozens of tactics and strategies depending on what the item is, how we're going to resolve it. Repossessions is a big deal. We get those off all the time because most of the time the balance reported by the bank is not accurate. So we're able to get, there's all kinds of ways to leverage things off of credit reports. We can get these kind of things removed. Now, I get them removed every day, but I can't ever guarantee to get something removed. I can't look at your report and say, yes, I can get that removed. But generally speaking, I can look at a report and I can say, yeah, we're going to have good success with this file. Am I going to make their credit report clean? No. But every item I can get removed, in most cases, has a score impact to it. And then we can also help them build positive credit. So it's not uncommon for us to help people get their scores up 150, 200 points, depending on where they start. So we're located in McKinney. I think I told you guys that I've been around this a long time, but we started the business in 2013. Our program is a maximum of 6 months long, but not everybody has to be in 6 months. And so what they end up doing is they'll pay us a few $100s to get started, and we'll even put that into a couple installments for them. And then generally speaking, our price is $129 a month for a max of 6 months. Again, they can stop early. If we get them to their goal ahead of time, they don't have to stay in for 6 months. We always review credit before we enroll somebody. So we do that for free. I'm not going to enroll somebody that we can't help. We have a perfect track record. We don't have anybody, all positive reviews, and it's because of the way that we deal with these clients. We really do a good job, and I don't want a negative review. And so we'll look at a credit report on the front end, and we might advise, maybe now's not the right time. Maybe you need to get these bills caught up that are, reporting late, and then talk to us in a few months. So we're gonna always make sure that they're a good candidate for our services before we enroll them. We specialize in getting people mortgage ready. The good news is you don't have to have perfect credit to buy a house. You just have to have, the right score. And, that's always possible. There's two factors, time and then making sure that the client does what they need to do. So they have some responsibility in this process, okay? We provide a client portal for all of our clients. And so, when they enroll with us, they electronically sign on our website. They're able to take and kind of keep up with what we're doing. You know, we're going to show them each item and the status of that item and you know, what's happening. We're not only going to work on their derogatory stuff, but we're also going to clean up any old or incorrect addresses and their personal information. We're going to work to fix that because, you know, the credit bureaus don't need your social to put something on your credit report. They use a combination of name, address, date of birth, and social. And so people with similar names, you know, parents that name their kids, you know, junior and second and third, we see mixed files all the time. And it's because of the name and the address and all that. And so we always want to clean that stuff up. You know, if there's a variation of your name that's not right on your credit report, it got there because you applied for credit somewhere and they typed your name in wrong. And so we work to fix all of that stuff, as well as we want all the old addresses off because we don't want your file getting mixed with somebody else's that might have a similar name who now lives there or nearby. So, you know, it's part of the strategy. So just finishing up with this, 5 ways to improve your credit score. Number 1, you got to look at it. You know, if you don't look at it, you don't know what's going on with it. So, you know, there's a tool there. There's dozens of good credit monitoring companies. It doesn't have to be this one, but you definitely need to be looking at a credit monitoring site that provides all 3 credit bureaus. Okay, so that's why Credit Karma isn't a good resource, because they don't give you Experian. Okay, you want to have 3 credit cards for sure. You want to have a minimum of 3. You want to keep those balances low, and you want to use them. You want to have the payment history on them. Never ever close a credit card. And let's see, what's my last one? Always use auto pay. I mean, you guys probably do. You know, I find it more difficult for the older generation to use auto pay. Set up auto pay for the minimum or what you think the minimum is, and then you can always pay more. But that way, if you forget it, you know, it happened. You know, it happened, and you at least made the minimum payment, and then you can always go back and pay more if you made a major purchase or something. I utilize credit cards for points. My youngest is graduating from college in May, and we're taking him to Germany and Italy, and it's all on points this year. So, I mean, I maximize points as much as I can, you know, in business. I use credit cards for everything. So, I don't know, you know, if you guys are, you know, you guys aren't helping people buy houses. I don't really know what you guys do, but generally speaking, you know, if you refer somebody to us, we're going to make sure that they go back to you so that they can, you know, buy the house with you as opposed to, you know, with somebody else. And it's great when it works. We do a lot of networking. You know, it's really the mortgage lender that we're working with a lot more. I mean, but that deal is always coming from a realtor. You know, and so I really try to work with realtors and, you know, and try to get, you know, in communication with them and their lender so we can keep everybody informed. Everybody needs their pipeline full. So instead of telling these clients no, give them a resource, you know. We can help them, and we're going to make sure they go back to you.